Okay, it's now time to glue up the panel. So we've got our biscuits in place, and now we have to get clamps. So you have to gather a couple of things. Get a bottle of glue, get a wet paper towel. That's for your fingers, not for wiping off the glue. It's just for wiping off your fingers. And your fingers are going to wipe off the glue. And then just a dry paper towel. Then eventually we'll need a paint scraper to scrape the excess glue off. We do want squeeze out. So first thing you're going to want to do is get 3 pipe clamps. Okay, so we have our 3 pipe clamps. Let's just move some of this stuff out of the way. Okay, pipe clamps have a movable foot. Okay, right there. You just push that spring in and it moves. Then when you put pressure on it, locks in place. Okay, have the handle end towards you. Open that up wider than what you require right now and back the thread off. Okay, if you have this threaded all the way up here like this, okay, you won't get very much thread room to put pressure on your piece of material. So back it out like that. So all your thread is behind the orange component of this clamp. Okay, so right there, have them sitting on the table. Don't hang them over the edge. Okay, we want to make sure that everything is nice and flat. If it's not flat, if we had this one on the table and this one down and went to glue everything up, okay, our panel wouldn't glue up flat. Okay, we want to keep everything as flat as possible. So, put your clamps about there, about the distance apart of where your biscuits are positioned. Take your panel, put it in place, the pointy part of the construction or carpenter's triangle pointing that direction. Okay, spread everything out, take your biscuits out. Put them off to the side. Don't get them too far away because you're going to need them. Okay, so our clamps are positioned really nice. We have a 3rd clamp out here because we're eventually going to put it on across the top. So, get your clamps nice and straight and parallel. All this stuff helps in keeping this nice and flat. Now, flip the triangle or the pieces up so that the triangle parts or the triangle faces you. The last piece you can just leave down. You don't have to glue it because we'll be gluing this, which will join to that. So, take your glue, put a bead of glue all the way along, like so. Then you're going to spread it with your finger. Okay? Go diagonal. It seems like a small thing to do, but it makes a big difference. It just spreads much faster. Glue has what's called open time. This glue, we want to get this whole panel done in about 2 minutes. Okay? This isn't a bad place where you could, ask a friend for help to help spread glue. Okay, so in that case, you get two glue bottles, 2 wet paper towels, 2 dry towels. Okay, just so you don't have to wait for each other. Okay, you want to put it on about that thick, so it will be kind of opaque. Here, I'll scrape some off. Okay, so that would be too thin. Okay, because we can really see the wood, we can feel the wood. We want it so that it's a little heavier. Okay, kind of semi-opaque or semi-transparent. Okay, put that one there. Then you can do these 2 since they're the exact same height. Do them in tandem. In regards to the biscuit slots, you do want to get some glue in there. You don't have to fill that slot up though, or else there's no room for the biscuit. They make a whole bunch of different spreaders for glue and things like that, but you know what? I've never found that I've had a bunch of success with those kind of commercial ones. I find fingers work best. Okay. You notice I tend to always put my glue bottle down sideways, like that. That just allows the glue to be closer to the nozzle as opposed to like this. then you have to wait for it longer. Okay, so I always tend to put it there so that it comes out of the nozzle fairly easily and fairly quickly, so I'm not waiting too long. All right. So everything's glued. Okay, I'm just going to scrape my finger off a little bit there. See, this one's starting to get a little bit tacky, so we're just going to put a touch more on there where I wiped it off. Now, just go along and just make sure you have a drop in there. The drop I'm putting inside there, just so you can see, is, I don't know, about half the size of a dime. There we go. Now, take your biscuits, put your biscuits in. Try to wear an apron when you do this. Glue will pretty much ruin your clothes. And then put glue on the biscuit. You don't have to spread it or anything like that. Remember, everything's oversized here. We're over length, we're over width, and we're over thickness. Okay, so now just flip them down so the triangle's facing up. Don't worry about squeezing them together too much. The clamp will do that. Get it like so. Bring this down. Move that in place. Now, again, don't worry if it's straight here. This is oversized. We're going to cut it down once it's all glued together. So, when you're clamping, put some pressure at the back, okay, and push and tighten your clamp up. Pressure at the back, tighten your clamp up. Remember, we want this as flat as possible right now. So then what I do is I look at it. I look and see that my pieces are touching the clamps all the way across on the underside. Okay, if you have a gap anywhere, loosen the clamp off, push down, maybe get a friend to help you push it down, then tighten it up. Okay, if you have it up from the clamps, it will tend to be warped on you when you take it out. Okay, which makes it a whole different animal to work with. Okay, so we're nice and flat. So you can see that we have some squeeze out, and that's good. Okay, that means we have enough glue in there. Okay, if you don't see that, they call that a starved joint. Now, what I like to do when I put my middle clamp on is I don't want the clamp to touch the glue. Okay, what will happen? Well, the iron from here will mix with the glue and causes black spots on your material. So I just put a couple of pencils down, or I try and hold it up. Make sure you can get the pencils out. So don't have too much pressure down. Okay, that's in place. Pull your pencils out. Tighten that clamp up. Okay, again, you don't have to absolutely reef on them. If you've done a nice job of milling, all your gaps were taken care of. Do a double check, make sure everything's sitting flat. That's sitting nice and flat right there. So we don't want to change a thing. Don't mess with the glue right now. Okay, we're going to come back. It's going to film up in probably 10 or 15 minutes, depending on the thickness of the glue and the temperature in here. And then we're going to use the paint scraper to scrape this glue off. We can't send it through the planer with glue on it. It'll just chip the blades, okay, which is not a good thing. And really try and make sure you come and do this in about 15 minutes, and then you won't have any problems. If it dries overnight, it's really hard, it's really difficult to take off the next day. So make sure you get it scraped off the day you glue it. So always allow yourself about a half an hour from the beginning of when you glue until class ends or whatever your next situation is. Okay, so we'll come back here in 15 minutes and we'll scrape the glue off. That's all there is to it. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes and now we have a film over the glue. Okay, so this is when you want to scrape it. So typically take your scraper, turn this in this fashion, then pull, and then clean the glue out. paint scraper, do that one. The reason you want to clean it out of here is just so it doesn't smear all over. Okay, you'll get too much buildup in there. Now I can see I have a little bit here. Scrape that out a little bit. There we go. Then turn it like so. Scrape this end of it. Clean that out. Clean that out. Better than that. Don't be worried if you take a little of the wood off, because we're going to be planing this down anyhow. But don't gouge the wood. So don't turn this on an angle like that. Okay? Keep it flat. Okay, and then take this off, which is fine to do just for a couple of seconds here. Scrape that. Clean. Scrape that. Clean. Scrape that, clean. With this clamp, now this clamp can actually sit down flat. It doesn't have to be suspended. Okay. Now we do the underside. So again, keep the clamps in position. Scrape that off, scrape that off, scrape that off. And we have these little ends too. We'll take that off too. Okay, we want to basically eliminate all the glue from the surface. Scrape in there. Scrape in there. Clean your paint scraper. Pick that up, do the ends. Now, take this clamp off. Scrape underneath where the clamp had been and replace the clamp. Then take this one off. Clean this out. Clean your paint scraper off really well. So if it dries in here, it doesn't work very well for the next person at all. So make sure you get it clean. And on the outside, that's what they should look like. Wow, this one still has a little bit. Take that off. That's what they should look like when you're done with them. Then just hang them back on the rack. Put the clamp back on. Make sure you've written your name on it. Okay, nice and big so it's easy to see. Okay, then it needs to sit for about 4 hours before we can do any milling. When you look at your piece, okay, make sure it's nice and clean. You don't have any glue in these spots or on the back side anywhere. If you do, you have to clean that off before we send it through the planer, or it's going to chip the blades, which we're not going to have. Okay, let that sit for 4 hours, and then we can start planing it. Okay, so our panel is now dry, so we can pop the clamps off, and then we're going to go over to the thickness planer. We're going to plane it down first, then we're going to cut it to width, then we're going to cut it to length. sometimes these bite in pretty good, so you just have to tap the little silver levers. Give it one last scrape. Just make sure there's nothing there. Nothing there. We're good. Also scrape off the bench when you're done. Alright, and clean off your paint scraper. Clean that off. There we go. Again, those are clean, and now we're going to go over to the planer. Okay, so we're now going to plane this down perfectly flat. So first thing you want to look for is if there's any cupping to it. So hold it like so, look down here, and see which is the cupped surface. Hopefully it's not cupped very bad, but it might be cupped a little bit. Put that cupped part down. So this is my cupped part. Okay, so I'm going to put it down. I'm going to put my lines across here. Again, I'm just using felt pen so you guys can see it easier on the camera. Like so. Okay, again, don't do just this or this. Okay, all the way across. And that's going to help us determine when it's completely flat. So, our thickness is 35 mils there, 35 mils there, which is good. That's what we want. So we're going to go to 38 millimeters. Right there. Turn it on. Remember, hold from the sides. Okay, so it's pulling it through, which is good. Didn't do any planing on that pass. So a half a turn of 12 o'clock in this case. Put it through. There we go. And you can see that we got rid of some of the lines, so we did have some high spots in there, obviously. So we'll go to another half a turn. Okay, now we have all of our lines off. We have a little bit of what's called snipe up here, a little ridge. That's not too big of a deal. That's very common on thickness planers. So now we have this surface completely flat. Flip it over, put your lines across. And we just have these shavings flying around because I don't have the dust collector on right now, so I don't have to yell over top of the noise from the dust collector. Anyhow, we'll put it through and we should be good. I can't remember if I wound the handle half a turn, so I'll just put it through anyhow. So there we go. We've taken off a little bit off that side. You can see where some of the lines have been planed off. Another half a turn. Bit left. There, so now we have that side nice and flat. Now don't be alarmed if you're putting this in and it goes in, it only gets through part way and then it stops. What happens is this top surface gets so smooth, the infeed roller can't grab it very well. So don't shut it off, don't do anything like that. Just take your push stick and push it in the rest of the way. Okay, so let's say that it got stuck right there and it wasn't going any further. Okay, just take your push stick. I like to put it on my hip and I will push that through. Then I'll come over here and retrieve it. Under no circumstances should you shut the planer off when the piece of wood is stuck in there. Okay, if that happens, just come and see me. Typically what we'll do is I'll give it a little bit more of a shove with the push stick. If that doesn't do it, then we actually lower the table to make that opening bigger. But that doesn't happen very often. But if that does happen, just come and see me. Just keep it running. Nothing will happen. Okay? Get my attention and I'll help you take care of that situation. Okay? So we now have our thickness. Now if we had to take this down to a particular thickness, okay, we would measure it, go a half turn, send it through, measure it, and just keep doing that until you get it down to your desired thickness. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the thickness planer. We have a nice looking panel here. Okay, after thickness planing, now we've got a nice flat surface. We still have our nice jointed edges. So what we're going to do now is we're going to rip it down to width. So this one I actually want to 12 inches. So we'll set our fence at 1 foot or 12 inches. Check our blade height. Have to raise that. Remember, you want to raise it so that the gullets are about 3 millimeters, the top gullet's about 3 millimeters above your material. Then tighten the lock nut back up. Drop this down. Turn on the saw. Left hand in place, right hand's back here. Remember, keep your thumb tucked in, not like this, but like that. Push with the base of your hand, the base of your thumb, basically. Left hand stays stationary. Standing off to the left. All the way through till the end of the board gets past this last part of the clear guard. Wait for it to stop before you reach in there. And there's our 12-inch wide panel. Now we're going to go to the crosscut sled and we will cut it to length. So we're at the crosscut sled on the table saw right now. So we're going to get ready to cut this to length. First thing we want to do, raise your blade so you have the gullets coming out about 3 millimeters. Right about there, tighten up the lock nut. Make sure it's nice and clean along the fence. Now, we don't have an even end. So we can't measure it off, measure our finished length yet. So all we want to do is straighten that out. So we've got our blade height set, pull the sled back a little bit, cover up the saw kerf, okay? Just so you don't see that saw kerf at all, okay? Then we'll trim that off. Right hand here, left hand holding the piece tight against the fence. Go through. Okay, don't push the sled all the way through. Just push the sled far enough that you see the blade cut through the top surface of your panel. Okay. Get rid of that. Now we have our nice straight edge. Now we can measure off of that. Always try and measure on the edge. It's going to make it easier to line up. We're going to cut this to 20 inches. And I'm going to put an X beside it. And I always mark it on the edge. It's a lot easier to line up with the blade. So again, make sure your crosscut sled is clean. Put your panel tight against the fence here. Then bring your line up to the blade. Back it up a little bit so it's not touching the blade. Turn it on. Wait for everything to stop. Pull it back. And there we have our nice squared off panel. To the 12 inches that we wanted, widthwise, we did that on the table saw, ripping it. And then we cut to length using the table saw and the crosscut sled. And that's how you make a panel. Okay, so a quick review. We started with 4 pieces that were milled as thick as possible, cut an inch, at least an inch longer than what you need. Then we milled all 4 pieces, keeping them all as big as we could. Okay. Then we marked out for biscuiting and smile, frown, and our carpenter's triangle. So we put our carpenter's triangle on, made sure that we alternated our grain, smile, frown. Marked in 5 inches on where we were going to put our biscuits. Okay, we did that. Then we cut our biscuits. Then we took it over to the glue table. We glued it up. We scraped it about 15 minutes after. We let it dry for 4 hours. Then we made sure all the glue was off of it. Took it over to the thickness planer. Planed it down to thickness. Okay, we've established our thickness. Then we took it to the table saw, we ripped it to width, and then on the crosscut sled, we cut it to length. So that's basically how you make a panel of any size when you're working with hardwood.